In the physical world, there is a clear and visible separation between private space and public space. For instance, your house and the perimeter around it is your private space, and you are entitled to enjoy privacy within your house. Your neighbors cannot just barge in and demand that you stop cooking or doing the laundry. Other people cannot simply walk in, sit on the couch and watch TV with you. When you are in a restaurant, a beach resort, or in a bus, however, the story is different. Anyone can sit with you and anyone can join you because you are in a public area. Our private space depends on where we are. We have a private space in the office, perhaps our cubicle. We are entitled to some privacy when we are in restrooms. Whatever the case, privacy is clearly demarcated in the physical world. In the digital world, however, it gets a bit tricky. Each of us have an idea of what should be private and what should be public in the digital place, but there seems to be no universal demarcation. However, this is no excuse for invading people's privacy. Large corporations, and even the government, cannot just say, there is no clear line between private and public space in the digital world, so we are not actually invading anyone's privacy. Perhaps we can go back to the basic definition of privacy. According to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, privacy is the quality or state of being apart from company or observation. It further provides another definition of privacy as the freedom from unauthorized intrusion. Privacy is the ability of an individual or group to seclude themselves or information about themselves, and thereby express themselves selectively. The domain of privacy partially overlaps with security, which can include the concepts of appropriate use and protection of information. Privacy may also take the form of bodily integrity. Throughout history, there have been various conceptions of privacy. Most cultures acknowledge the right of individuals to keep aspects of their personal lives out of the public domain. The right to be free from unauthorized invasions of privacy by governments, corporations, or individuals is enshrined in the privacy laws of many countries and, in some instances, their constitutions. With the rise of technology, the debate regarding privacy has expanded from a bodily sense to include a digital sense. In most countries, the right to digital privacy is considered an extension of the original right to privacy, and many countries have passed acts that further protect digital privacy from public and private entities. There are multiple techniques to invade privacy, which may be employed by corporations or governments for profit or political reasons. Conversely, in order to protect privacy, people may employ encryption or anonymity measures. The word privacy is derived from the Latin word privatus, which means set apart from what is public, personal, and belonging to oneself, and not to the state. It is also derived from the Latin word privo, which conveys the idea of deprivation or being robbed of. The Internet and technologies built on it enable new forms of social interactions at increasingly faster speeds and larger scales. Because the computer networks which underlie the Internet introduce such a wide range of novel security concerns, the discussion of privacy on the Internet is often conflated with security. Indeed, many entities such as corporations involved in the surveillance economy inculcate a security-focused conceptualization of privacy which reduces their obligations to uphold privacy into a matter of regulatory compliance, while at the same time lobbying to minimize those regulatory requirements. The Internet's effect on privacy includes all of the ways that computational technology and the entities that control it can subvert the privacy expectations of their users. In particular, the right to be forgotten is motivated by both the computational ability to store and search through massive amounts of data as well as the subverted expectations of users who share information online without expecting it to be stored and retained indefinitely. Phenomena such as revenge porn and deepfakes are not merely individual because they require both the ability to obtain images without someone's consent as well as the social and economic infrastructure to disseminate that content widely. Therefore, privacy advocacy groups such as the Cyber Civil Rights Initiative and the Electronic Frontier Foundation argue that addressing the new privacy harms introduced by the Internet requires both technological improvements to encryption and anonymity as well as societal efforts such as legal regulations to restrict corporate and government power. While the Internet began as a government and academic effort up through the 1980s, private corporations began to enclose the hardware and software of the Internet in the 1990s, and now most Internet infrastructure is owned and managed by for-profit corporations. As a result, the ability of governments to protect their citizens' privacy is largely restricted to industrial policy, instituting controls on corporations that handle communications or personal data. Privacy regulations are often further constrained to only protect specific demographics such as children, or specific industries such as credit card bureaus. Several online social network sites, OSNs, are among the top 10 most visited websites globally. Facebook, for example, as of August 2015, was the largest social networking site, with nearly 2.7 billion members, who upload over 4.75 billion pieces of content daily. While Twitter is significantly smaller with 316 million registered users, the U.S. Library of Congress recently announced that it will be acquiring and permanently storing the entire archive of public Twitter posts since 2006. A review and evaluation of scholarly work regarding the current state of the value of individuals' privacy of online social networking show the following results. First, adults seem to be more concerned about potential privacy threats than younger users. Second, policymakers should be alarmed by a large part of users who underestimate risks of their information privacy on OSNs. Third, in the case of using OSNs and its services, traditional one-dimensional privacy approaches fall short. This is exacerbated by de-anonymization research indicating that personal traits such as sexual orientation, race, religious and political views, personality, or intelligence can be inferred based on a wide variety of digital footprints, such as samples of text, browsing logs, or Facebook likes. Intrusions of social media privacy are known to affect employment in the United States. Microsoft reports that 75% of U.S. recruiters and human resource professionals now do online research about candidates, often using information provided by search engines, social networking sites, photo/video sharing sites, personal websites and blogs, and Twitter. They also report that 70% of U.S. recruiters have rejected candidates based on Internet information. This has created a need by many candidates to control various online privacy settings in addition to controlling their online reputations, the conjunction of which has led to legal suits against both social media sites and U.S. employers. Selfies are popular today. A search for photos with the hashtag #selfie retrieves over 23 million results on Instagram and 51 million with the hashtag #me. However, due to modern corporate and governmental surveillance, this may pose a risk to privacy. In a research study which takes a sample size of 3,763, researchers found that for users posting selfies on social media, women generally have greater concerns over privacy than men, and that users' privacy concerns inversely predict their selfie behavior and activity. An invasion of someone's privacy may be widely and quickly disseminated over the Internet. When social media sites and other online communities fail to invest in content moderation, an invasion of privacy can expose people to a much greater volume and degree of harassment than would otherwise be possible. Revenge porn may lead to misogynist or homophobic harassment, such as in the suicide of Amanda Todd and the suicide of Tyler Clemente. When someone's physical location or other sensitive information is leaked over the Internet via doxing, harassment may escalate to direct physical harm such as stalking or swatting. Despite the way breaches of privacy can magnify online harassment is often used as a justification to curtail freedom of speech, by removing the expectation of privacy via anonymity, or by enabling law enforcement to invade privacy without a search warrant. In the wake of Amanda Todd's death, the Canadian Parliament proposed a motion purporting to stop bullying, but Todd's mother herself gave testimony to Parliament rejecting the bill due to its provisions for warrantless breaches of privacy, stating, "I don't want to see our children victimized again by losing privacy rights." Even where these laws have been passed despite privacy concerns, they have not demonstrated a reduction in online harassment. when the Korea Communications Commission introduced a registration system for online commenters in 2007, they reported that malicious comments only decreased by 0.9%, and in 2011 it was repealed. A subsequent analysis found that the set of users who posted the most comments actually increased the number of aggressive expressions when forced to use their real name. In the US, while federal law only prohibits online harassment based on protected characteristics such as gender and race, individual states have expanded the definition of harassment to further curtail speech. Florida's definition of online harassment includes any use of data or computer software that has the effect of substantially disrupting the orderly operation of a school. Increasingly, mobile devices facilitate location tracking. This creates user privacy problems. A user's location and preferences constitute personal information, and their improper use violates that user's privacy. A recent MIT study by Demontjoy et al. Showed that 4 spatiotemporal points constituting approximate places and times are enough to uniquely identify 95% of 1.5 million people in a mobility database. The study further shows that these constraints hold even when the resolution of the dataset is low. Therefore, even coarse or blurred datasets confer little privacy protection. Several methods to protect user privacy in location-based services have been proposed, including the use of anonymizing servers and blurring of information. Methods to quantify privacy have also been proposed, to calculate the equilibrium between the benefit of obtaining accurate location information and the risks of breaching an individual's privacy. There have been scandals regarding location privacy. One instance was the scandal concerning AccuWeather, where it was revealed that AccuWeather was selling locational data. This consisted of a user's locational data, even if they opted out within AccuWeather, which tracked users' location. AccuWeather sold this data to Reveal Mobile, a company that monetizes data related to a user's location. Other international cases are similar to the AccuWeather case. In 2017, a leaky API inside the McDelivery app exposed private data, which consisted of home addresses, of 2.2 million users. In the wake of these types of scandals, many large American technology companies such as Google, Apple, and Facebook have been subjected to hearings and pressure under the U.S. legislative system. In 2011, U.S. Senator Al Franken wrote an open letter to Steve Jobs, noting the ability of iPhones and iPads to record and store users' locations in unencrypted files. 5354 Apple claimed this was an unintentional software bug, but Justin Brookman of the Center for Democracy and Technology directly challenged that portrayal, stating, "I'm glad that they are fixing what they call bugs, but I take exception with their strong denial that they track users." In 2021, the U.S. state of Arizona found in a court case that Google misled its users and stored the location of users regardless of their location settings. The Internet has become a significant medium for advertising, with digital marketing making up approximately half of the global ad spending in 2019. While websites are still able to sell advertising space without tracking, including via contextual advertising, digital ad brokers such as Facebook and Google have instead encouraged the practice of behavioral advertising, providing code snippets used by website owners to track their users via HTTP cookies. This tracking data is also sold to other third parties as part of the mass surveillance industry. Since the introduction of mobile phones, data brokers have also been planted within apps, resulting in a $350 billion digital industry especially focused on mobile devices. Digital privacy has become the main source of concern for many mobile users, especially with the rise of privacy scandals such as the Facebook, Cambridge Analytica data scandal. Recently, Apple has received positive press for features that prohibit advertisers from tracking a user's data without their consent. While Google attempted to introduce an alternative to cookies named Flock, which it claimed reduced the privacy harms, it later retracted the proposal due to antitrust probes and analyses that contradicted their claims of privacy. The ability to do online inquiries about individuals has expanded dramatically over the last decade. Importantly, directly observed behavior, such as browsing logs, search queries, or contents of a public Facebook profile, can be automatically processed to infer secondary information about an individual, such as sexual orientation, political and religious views, race, substance use, intelligence, and personality. In Australia, the Telecommunications, Interception and Access Amendment, Data Retention Act 2015 made a distinction between collecting the contents of messages sent between users and the metadata surrounding those messages. Most countries give citizens rights to privacy in their constitutions. Representative examples of this include the Constitution of Brazil, which says the privacy, private life, honor and image of people are inviolable. The Constitution of South Africa says that everyone has a right to privacy, and the Constitution of the Republic of Korea says the privacy of no citizen shall be infringed. The Italian Constitution also defines the right to privacy. Among most countries whose constitutions do not explicitly describe privacy rights, court decisions have interpreted their constitutions to intend to give privacy rights. Many countries have broad privacy laws outside their constitutions, including Australia's Privacy Act 1988, Argentina's Law for the Protection of Personal Data of 2000, Canada's 2000 Personal Information Protection and Electronic Documents Act, and Japan's 2003 Personal Information Protection Law. Beyond national privacy laws, there are international privacy agreements. The United Nations Universal Declaration of Human Rights says no one shall be subjected to arbitrary interference with their privacy, family, home, or correspondence, nor to attacks upon their honor and reputation. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development published its privacy guidelines in 1980. The European Union's 1995 Data Protection Directive guides privacy protection in Europe. The 2004 Privacy Framework by the Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation is a privacy protection agreement for the members of that organization. Approaches to privacy can, broadly, be divided into two categories: free market or consumer protection. One example of the free market approach is to be found in the voluntary OECD guidelines on the protection of privacy and transborder flows of personal data. The principles reflected in the guidelines, free of legislative interference, are analyzed in an article putting them into perspective with concepts of the GDPR put into law later in the European Union. In a consumer protection approach, in contrast, it is claimed that individuals may not have the time or knowledge to make informed choices, or may not have reasonable alternatives available. In support of this view, Jensen and Potts showed that most privacy policies are above the reading level of the average person. The theory of contextual integrity, developed by Helen Nissenbaum, defines privacy as an appropriate information flow, where appropriateness, in turn, is defined as conformance with legitimate, informational norms specific to social contexts. In 1890, the United States jurists Samuel D. Warren and Louis Brandeis wrote The Right to Privacy, an article in which they argued for the right to be let alone, using that phrase as a definition of privacy. This concept relies on the theory of natural rights and focuses on protecting individuals. The citation was a response to recent technological developments, such as photography, and sensationalist journalism, also known as yellow journalism. There is extensive commentary over the meaning of being let alone, and among other ways, it has been interpreted to mean the right of a person to choose seclusion from the attention of others if they wish to do so, and the right to be immune from scrutiny or being observed in private settings, such as one's own home. Although this early vague legal concept did not describe privacy in a way that made it easy to design broad legal protections of privacy, it strengthened the notion of privacy rights for individuals and began a legacy of discussion on those rights in the U.S. Limited access refers to a person's ability to participate in society without having other individuals and organizations collect information about them. Various theorists have imagined privacy as a system for limiting access to one's personal information. Edwin Lawrence Godkin wrote in the late 19th century that nothing is better worthy of legal protection than private life, or, in other words, the right of every man to keep his affairs to himself, and to decide for himself to what extent they shall be the subject of public observation and discussion. Adopting an approach similar to the one presented by Ruth Gavison 9 years earlier, Cicely Bach said that privacy is the condition of being protected from unwanted access by others, either physical access, personal information, or attention. Control over one's personal information is the concept that privacy is the claim of individuals, groups, or institutions to determine for themselves when, how, and to what extent information about them is communicated to others. Generally, a person who has consensually formed an interpersonal relationship with another person is not considered protected by privacy rights with respect to the person they are in the relationship with. Charles Fried said that privacy is not simply an absence of information about us in the minds of others, rather it is the control we have over information about ourselves. Nevertheless, in the era of big data, control over information is under pressure. Alan Weston defined 4 states or experiences of privacy: solitude, intimacy, anonymity, and reserve. Solitude is a physical separation from others, intimacy is a close, relaxed, and frank relationship between 2 or more individuals that results from the seclusion of a pair or small group of individuals. Anonymity is the desire of individuals for times of public privacy. Lastly, reserve is the creation of a psychological barrier against unwanted intrusion. This creation of a psychological barrier requires others to respect an individual's need or desire to restrict communication of information concerning themselves. In addition to the psychological barrier of reserve, Kirsty Hughes identified 3 more kinds of privacy barriers: physical, behavioral, and normative. Physical barriers, such as walls and doors, prevent others from accessing and experiencing the individual. In this sense, accessing an individual includes accessing personal information about them. Behavioral barriers communicate to others verbally, through language, or non-verbally, through personal space, body language, or clothing that an individual does not want the other person to access or experience them. Lastly, normative barriers, such as laws and social norms, restrain others from attempting to access or experience an individual. Psychologist Carl A. Johnson has identified the psychological concept of personal control as closely tied to privacy. His concept was developed as a process containing 4 stages and 2 behavioral outcome relationships, with one's outcomes depending on situational as well as personal factors. Privacy is described as behaviors falling at specific locations on these 2 dimensions. Johnson examined the following 4 stages to categorize where people exercise personal control. Outcome choice control is the selection between various outcomes. Behavior selection control is the selection between behavioral strategies to apply to attain selected outcomes. Outcome effectance describes the fulfillment of selected behavior to achieve chosen outcomes. Outcome realization control is the personal interpretation of one's achieved outcome. The relationship between 2 factors, primary and secondary control, is defined as the 2-dimensional phenomenon where one reaches personal control. Primary control describes behavior directly causing outcomes, while secondary control is behavior indirectly causing outcomes. Johnson explores the concept that privacy is a behavior that has secondary control over outcomes. Acknowledging other conceptions of privacy while arguing that the fundamental concern of privacy is behavior selection control, Johnson converses with other interpretations including those of Maxine Wolf and Robert S. Laufer, and Erwin Altman. He clarifies the continuous relationship between privacy and personal control, where outlined behaviors not only depend on privacy, but the conception of one's privacy also depends on his defined behavioral outcome relationships. Privacy is sometimes defined as an option to have secrecy. Richard Posner said that privacy is the right of people to conceal information about themselves that others might use to their disadvantage. In various legal contexts, when privacy is described as secrecy, a conclusion is reached: if privacy is secrecy, then rights to privacy do not apply for any information which is already publicly disclosed. When privacy as secrecy is discussed, it is usually imagined to be a selective kind of secrecy in which individuals keep some information secret and private while they choose to make other information public and not private. Privacy may be understood as a necessary precondition for the development and preservation of personhood. Jeffrey Ryman defined privacy in terms of a recognition of one's ownership of their physical and mental reality and a moral right to self-determination. Through the social ritual of privacy, or the social practice of respecting an individual's privacy barriers, the social group communicates to developing children that they have exclusive moral rights to their bodies, in other words, moral ownership of their body. This entails control over both active, physical, and cognitive appropriation, the former being control over one's movements and actions and the latter being control over who can experience one's physical existence and when. Alternatively, Stanley Benn defined privacy in terms of a recognition of oneself as a subject with agency, as an individual with the capacity to choose. Privacy is required to exercise choice. Overt observation makes the individual aware of himself or herself as an object with a determinate character and limited probabilities. Covert observation, on the other hand, changes the conditions in which the individual is exercising choice without his or her knowledge and consent. In addition, privacy may be viewed as a state that enables autonomy, a concept closely connected to that of personhood. According to Joseph Kupfer, an autonomous self-concept entails a conception of oneself as a purposeful, self-determining, responsible agent and an awareness of one's capacity to control the boundary between self and other, that is, to control who can access and experience him or her and to what extent. Furthermore, others must acknowledge and respect the self's boundaries. In other words, they must respect the individual's privacy. The studies of psychologists such as Jean Piaget and Victor Tosk show that, as children learn that they can control who can access and experience them and to what extent, they develop an autonomous self-concept. In addition, studies of adults in particular institutions, such as Irving Goffman's study of total institutions such as prisons and mental institutions, suggest that systemic and routinized deprivations or violations of privacy deteriorate one's sense of autonomy over time. Privacy may be understood as a prerequisite for the development of a sense of self-identity. Privacy barriers, in particular, are instrumental in this process. According to Erwin Altman, such barriers define and limit the boundaries of the self and thus serve to help define the self. This control primarily entails the ability to regulate contact with others. Control over the permeability of the self's boundaries enables one to control what constitutes the self and thus to define what is the self. In addition, privacy may be seen as a state that fosters personal growth, a process integral to the development of self-identity. Hyman Gross suggested that, without privacy, solitude, anonymity, and temporary releases from social roles, individuals would be unable to freely express themselves and to engage in self-discovery and self-criticism. Such self-discovery and self-criticism contributes to one's understanding of oneself and shapes one's sense of identity. In a way analogous to how the personhood theory imagines privacy as some essential part of being an individual, the intimacy theory imagines privacy to be an essential part of the way that humans have strengthened or intimate relationships with other humans. Because part of human relationships includes individuals volunteering to self-disclose most if not all personal information, this is one area in which privacy does not apply. James Rachels advanced this notion by writing that privacy matters because there is a close connection between our ability to control who has access to us and to information about us, and our ability to create and maintain different sorts of social relationships with different people. Protecting intimacy is at the core of the concept of sexual privacy, which law professor Danielle Citron argues should be protected as a unique form of privacy. Physical privacy could be defined as preventing intrusions into one's physical space or solitude. An example of the legal basis for the right to physical privacy is the U.S. Fourth Amendment, which guarantees the right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects, against unreasonable searches and seizures. Physical privacy may be a matter of cultural sensitivity, personal dignity, and/or shyness. There may also be concerns about safety, if, for example, one is wary of becoming the victim of crime or stalking. There are different things that can be prevented to protect one's physical privacy, including people watching, even through recorded images, one's intimate behaviors or intimate parts, and unauthorized access to one's personal possessions or places. Examples of possible efforts used to avoid the former, especially for modesty reasons, are clothes, walls, fences, privacy screens, cathedral glass, window coverings, etc. Government agencies, corporations, groups/societies and other organizations may desire to keep their activities or secrets from being revealed to other organizations or individuals, adopting various security practices and controls in order to keep private information confidential. Organizations may seek legal protection for their secrets. For example, a government administration may be able to invoke executive privilege or declare certain information to be classified, or a corporation might attempt to protect valuable proprietary information as trade secrets. Privacy self-synchronization is a hypothesized mode by which the stakeholders of an enterprise privacy program spontaneously contribute collaboratively to the program's maximum success. The stakeholders may be customers, employees, managers, executives, suppliers, partners, or investors. When self-synchronization is reached, the model states that the personal interests of individuals toward their privacy is in balance with the business interests of enterprises who collect and use the personal information of those individuals. David Flaherty believes networked computer databases pose threats to privacy. He develops data protection as an aspect of privacy, which involves the collection, use, and dissemination of personal information. This concept forms the foundation for fair information practices used by governments globally. Flaherty forwards an idea of privacy as information control. Individuals want to be left alone and to exercise some control over how information about them is used. Richard Posner and Lawrence Lessig focus on the economic aspects of personal information control. Posner criticizes privacy for concealing information, which reduces market efficiency. For Posner, employment is selling oneself in the labor market, which he believes is like selling a product. Any defect in the product that is not reported is fraud. For Lessig, privacy breaches online can be regulated through code and law. Lessig claims the protection of privacy would be stronger if people conceived of the right as a property right, and that individuals should be able to control information about themselves. There have been attempts to establish privacy as one of the fundamental human rights, whose social value is an essential component in the functioning of democratic societies. Priscilla Reagan believes that individual concepts of privacy have failed philosophically and in policy. She supports a social value of privacy with three dimensions: shared perceptions, public values, and collective components. Shared ideas about privacy allows freedom of conscience and diversity in thought. Public values guarantee democratic participation, including freedoms of speech and association, and limits government power. Collective elements describe privacy as collective good that cannot be divided. Reagan's goal is to strengthen privacy claims in policy making. If we did recognize the collective or public good value of privacy, as well as the common and public value of privacy, those advocating privacy protections would have a stronger basis upon which to argue for its protection. Leslie Reagan Shade argues that the human right to privacy is necessary for meaningful democratic participation, and ensures human dignity and autonomy. Privacy depends on norms for how information is distributed, and if this is appropriate. Violations of privacy depend on context. The human right to privacy has precedent in the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights. Everyone has the right to freedom of opinion and expression. This right includes freedom to hold opinions without interference and to seek, receive, and impart information and ideas through any media and regardless of frontiers. Shade believes that privacy must be approached from a people-centered perspective, and not through the marketplace. Dr. Eliza Watt, Westminster Law School, University of Westminster in London, UK, proposes application of the International Human Rights Law, IHRL, concept of virtual control as an approach to deal with extraterritorial mass surveillance by state intelligence agencies. Dr. Watt envisions the virtual control test, understood as a remote control over the individual's right to privacy of communications, where privacy is recognized under the ICPAIR, Article 17. This, she contends, may help to close the normative gap that is being exploited by nation-states. The privacy paradox is a phenomenon in which online users state that they are concerned about their privacy but behave as if they were not. While this term was coined as early as 1998, it was not used in its current popular sense until the year 2000. Susan B. Barnes similarly used the term privacy paradox to refer to the ambiguous boundary between private and public space on social media. When compared to adults, young people tend to disclose more information on social media. However, this does not mean that they are not concerned about their privacy. Susan B. Barnes gave a case in her article. In a television interview about Facebook, a student addressed her concerns about disclosing personal information online. However, when the reporter asked to see her Facebook page, she put her home address, phone numbers, and pictures of her young son on the page. The privacy paradox has been studied and scripted in different research settings. Several studies have shown this inconsistency between privacy attitudes and behavior among online users. However, by now an increasing number of studies have also shown that there are significant and at times large correlations between privacy concerns and information sharing behavior, which speaks against the privacy paradox. A meta-analysis of 166 studies published on the topic reported an overall small but significant relation between privacy concerns and information sharing or use of privacy protection measures. So although there are several individual instances or anecdotes where behavior appear paradoxical, on average privacy concerns and privacy behaviors seem to be related, and several findings question the general existence of the privacy paradox. However, the relationship between concerns and behavior is likely only small, and there are several arguments that can explain why that is the case. According to the attitude-behavior gap, attitudes and behaviors are in general and in most cases not closely related. A main explanation for the partial mismatch in the context of privacy specifically is that users lack awareness of the risks and the degree of protection. Users may underestimate the harm of disclosing information online. On the other hand, some researchers argue that the mismatch comes from lack of technology literacy and from the design of sites. For example, users may not know how to change their default settings even though they care about their privacy. Psychologists Sonia Utz and Nicole C. Kramer particularly pointed out that the privacy paradox can occur when users must trade off between their privacy concerns and impression management. A study conducted by Suzanne Barth and Menno D. T. de Joe demonstrates that decision-making takes place on an irrational level, especially when it comes to mobile computing. Mobile applications in particular are often built up in such a way that spurs decision-making that is fast and automatic without assessing risk factors. Protection measures against these unconscious mechanisms are often difficult to access while downloading and installing apps. Even with mechanisms in place to protect user privacy, users may not have the knowledge or experience to enable these mechanisms. Users of mobile applications generally have very little knowledge of how their personal data are used. When they decide which application to download, they typically are not able to effectively interpret the information provided by application vendors regarding the collection and use of personal data. Other research finds that this lack of interpretability means users are much more likely to be swayed by cost, functionality, design, ratings, reviews and number of downloads than requested permissions for usage of their personal data. The willingness to incur a privacy risk is suspected to be driven by a complex array of factors including risk attitudes, personal value for private information, and general attitudes to privacy, which are typically measured using surveys. One experiment aiming to determine the monetary value of several types of personal information indicated relatively low evaluations of personal information. Despite claims that ascertaining the value of data requires a stock market for personal information, surveillance capitalism and the mass surveillance industry regularly place price tags on this form of data as it is shared between corporations and governments. Users are not always given the tools to live up to their professed privacy concerns, and they are sometimes willing to trade private information for convenience, functionality, or financial gain, even when the gains are very small. One study suggests that people think their browser history is worth the equivalent of a cheap meal. Another finds that attitudes to privacy risk do not appear to depend on whether it is already under threat or not. The methodology of user empowerment describes how to provide users with sufficient context to make privacy-informed decisions. It is suggested by Andrea Belliger and David J. Krieger that the privacy paradox should not be considered a paradox, but more of a privacy dilemma, for services that cannot exist without the user sharing private data. However, the general public is typically not given the choice whether to share private data or not, making it difficult to verify any claim that a service truly cannot exist without sharing private data. The privacy calculus model posits that two factors determine privacy behavior, namely privacy concerns, or perceived risks, and expected benefits. By now, the privacy calculus has been supported by several studies. As with other conceptions of privacy, there are various ways to discuss what kinds of processes or actions remove, challenge, lessen, or attack privacy. In 1960, legal scholar William Prosser created the following list of activities which can be remedied with privacy protection. 1. Intrusion into a person's private space, own affairs, or wish for solitude. 2. Public disclosure of personal information about a person which could be embarrassing for them to have revealed. 3. Promoting access to information about a person which could lead the public to have incorrect beliefs about them. 4. Encroaching someone's personality rights, and using their likeness to advance interests which are not their own. From 2004 to 2008, building from this and other historical precedents, Daniel J. Solow presented another classification of actions which are harmful to privacy, including collection of information which is already somewhat public, processing of information, sharing information, and invading personal space to get private information. In the context of harming privacy, information collection means gathering whatever information can be obtained by doing something to obtain it. Examples include surveillance and interrogation. Another example is how consumers and marketers also collect information in the business context through facial recognition, which has recently caused a concern for things such as privacy. There is currently research being done related to this topic. Companies like Google and Meta collect vast amounts of personal data from their users through various services and platforms. This data includes browsing habits, search history, location information, and even personal communications. These companies then analyze and aggregate this data to create detailed user profiles, which are sold to advertisers and other third parties. This practice is often done without explicit user consent, leading to an invasion of privacy as individuals have little control over how their information is used. The sale of personal data can result in targeted advertising, manipulation, and even potential security risks, as sensitive information can be exploited by malicious actors. This commercial exploitation of personal data undermines user trust and raises significant ethical and legal concerns regarding data protection and privacy rights. It can happen that privacy is not harmed when information is available, but that the harm can come when that information is collected as a set, then processed together in such a way that the collective reporting of pieces of information encroaches on privacy. Actions in this category which can lessen privacy include the following. Data aggregation, which is connecting many related but unconnected pieces of information. Identification, which can mean breaking the de-identification of items of data by putting it through a de-anonymization process, thus making facts which were intended to not name particular people to become associated with those people. Insecurity, such as lack of data security, which includes when an organization is supposed to be responsible for protecting data instead suffers a data breach which harms the people whose data it held. Secondary use, which is when people agree to share their data for a certain purpose, but then the data is used in ways without the data donor's informed consent. Exclusion is the use of a person's data without any attempt to give the person an opportunity to manage the data or participate in its usage. Count not him among your friends who will retail your privacies to the world. Publicitas. Information dissemination is an attack on privacy when information which was shared in confidence is shared or threatened to be shared in a way that harms the subject of the information. There are various examples of this. Breach of confidentiality is when one entity promises to keep a person's information private, then breaks that promise. Disclosure is making information about a person more accessible in a way that harms the subject of the information, regardless of how the information was collected or the intent of making it available. Exposure is a special type of disclosure in which the information disclosed is emotional to the subject or taboo to share, such as revealing their private life experiences, their nudity, or perhaps private body functions. Increased accessibility means advertising the availability of information without actually distributing it, as in the case of doxing. Blackmail is making a threat to share information, perhaps as part of an effort to coerce someone. Appropriation is an attack on the personhood of someone, and can include using the value of someone's reputation or likeness to advance interests which are not those of the person being appropriated. Distortion is the creation of misleading information or lies about a person. Invasion of privacy, a subset of expectation of privacy, is a different concept from the collecting, aggregating, and disseminating information because those three are a misuse of available data, whereas invasion is an attack on the right of individuals to keep personal secrets. An invasion is an attack in which information, whether intended to be public or not, is captured in a way that insults the personal dignity and right to private space of the person whose data is taken. An intrusion is any unwanted entry into a person's private personal space and solitude for any reason, regardless of whether data is taken during that breach of space. Decisional interference is when an entity somehow injects itself into the personal decision-making process of another person, perhaps to influence that person's private decisions, but in any case doing so in a way that disrupts the private personal thoughts that a person has. In 2019, contract workers for Apple and Amazon reported being forced to continue listening to intimate moments captured on the company's smart speakers in order to improve the quality of their automated speech recognition software. Similarly to actions which reduce privacy, there are multiple angles of privacy and multiple techniques to improve them to varying extents. When actions are done at an organizational level, they may be referred to as cybersecurity. Individuals can encrypt emails via enabling either two encryption protocols, S/MIME, which is built into companies like Apple or Outlook and thus most common, or PGP. The Signal messaging app, which encrypts messages so that only the recipient can read the message, is notable for being available on many mobile devices and implementing a form of perfect forward secrecy. Signal has received praise from whistleblower Edward Snowden. Encryption and other privacy-based security measures are also used in some cryptocurrencies such as Monero and Zcash. Anonymizing proxies or anonymizing networks like I2P and Tor can be used to prevent Internet Service Providers, ISP, from knowing which sites one visits and with whom one communicates, by hiding IP addresses and location, but does not necessarily protect a user from third-party data mining. Anonymizing proxies are built into a user's device, in comparison to a virtual private network, VPN, where users must download software. Using a VPN hides all data and connections that are exchanged between servers and a user's computer, resulting in the online data of the user being unshared and secure, providing a barrier between the user and their ISP, and is especially important to use when a user is connected to public Wi-Fi. However, users should understand that all their data does flow through the VPN servers rather than the ISP. Users should decide for themselves if they wish to use either an anonymizing proxy or a VPN. In a more non-technical sense, using incognito mode or private browsing mode will prevent a user's computer from saving history, internet files, and cookies, but the ISP will still have access to the user's search history. Using anonymous search engines will not share a user's history, clicks, and will obstruct ad blockers. Concrete solutions on how to solve paradoxical behavior still do not exist. Many efforts are focused on processes of decision-making, like restricting data access permissions during application installation, but this would not completely bridge the gap between user intention and behavior. Suzanne Barth and Menno D.T. de Jong believe that for users to make more conscious decisions on privacy matters, the design needs to be more user-oriented. In a social sense, simply limiting the amount of personal information that users post on social media could increase their security, which in turn makes it harder for criminals to perform identity theft. Moreover, creating a set of complex passwords and using two-factor authentication can allow users to be less susceptible to their accounts being compromised when various data leaks occur. Furthermore, users should protect their digital privacy by using antivirus software, which can block harmful viruses like a pop-up scanning for personal information on a user's computer. Although there are laws that promote the protection of users, in some countries, like the US, there is no federal digital privacy law and privacy settings are essentially limited by the state of current enacted privacy laws. To further their privacy, users can start conversing with representatives, letting representatives know that privacy is a main concern, which in turn increases the likelihood of further privacy laws being enacted. Thank you for watching this video.